Hey everyone, Jake here from CVP, and today we're taking a look at this, the original Blackmagic Pocket Cinema camera. This little camera has gained somewhat of a cult following over the years for a few reasons, and in this video we're going to delve into why and answer the question, should you buy the Blackmagic Pocket in 2023? The Pocket came out all the way back in 2013, and even over the nearly 10 years of being on the market, there really isn't too many other cameras come out like this, other than maybe the Sigma FP. One of the biggest pulls for people to use this camera was the image that they could produce in such a small package. At the time, being able to capture really solid looking imagery in such a small and affordable camera was a whole new concept, especially when compared to the smaller cameras at the time which had much worse image quality in comparison. At release it did have some issues, such as the infamous black sun artifact, but this issue, along with the others, were fixed throughout the years. The sensor inside of the Blackmagic Pocket was closer to Super 16 film than Micro Four Thirds. It has a physical dimension of 12.48 by 7.02mm and can capture a maximum resolution of 1920 by 1080 at frame rates up to 30p, including 23.98. It being close in size to Super 16 film gave it a certain nostalgia factor, with anyone who has shot or holds films shot on Super 16 close to their heart. Comparatively to full frame, this sensor has a crop factor of 2.88 times. While larger sensors are all the rage currently, smaller sensors do have their pros. The cameras and lenses designed for smaller formats are usually smaller, lighter, and more affordable. With smaller sensor sizes, you are able to achieve a deeper depth of field than with larger sensors at the same field of view, an equivalent f-stop. This is something that some shooters may want for work such as run and gun documentary. You will also be able to achieve tighter fields of view, aka longer zooms, because of the size of the sensor. It has a base ISO of 800 and you really need to shoot at this or lower, as going above this or underexposing will result in noise to start to creep in. For most scenarios, sticking at around ISO 400 will give you the cleanest image without sacrificing too much dynamic range, though you can go up to 800 or a push 1600. Though the noise profile of the Pocket is fairly organic looking and can look quite nice with some chroma noise reduction in post. The footage is decently detailed for such a low resolution sensor, but in the modern age of high resolution sensors, it definitely does look a bit soft. However, for some people this is actually an image they may prefer over hyper detailed imagery out of modern systems. When it comes to dynamic range, the original Pocket was rated at roughly 13 stops, and when it comes to latitude, it doesn't quite hold up as well as it could compared to modern sensors, but that's hardly surprising. Overexposure is where we see really bad performance, but I was quite surprised with the underexposure performance. It holds detail and colour pretty well, and with some chroma noise reduction in post, can clean up alright. So basically when you're shooting with this camera, just make sure not to clip your highlights. The Pocket is able to record in either lossless 12-bit Cinema DNG RAW or in ProRes 42HQ, though at launch you could only shoot ProRes. Back in 2019, Blackmagic started their transition away from Cinema DNG towards their own RAW format, B-RAW. The DNG format was originally designed by Adobe for still imagery, but Cinema DNG, which was announced at NAB 2008, was the adapted format for motion picture acquisition and was an open standard format. Blackmagic have always been trying to push as much into their cameras as possible, while keeping the price also as low as possible. So Cinema DNG being an open standard made it a no-brainer for Blackmagic to start implementing into their cameras, as it was much more affordable for them to use and develop. Working with Cinema DNG in 2022 through Resolve is perfectly fine. You get all of the raw controls you expect, and playback of the 1080p footage out of the Pocket is great on our Mac Studio. I remember shooting Cinema DNG myself on the original Blackmagic Cinema camera, as well as my Magic Lantern hacked 5D Mark II. And while it was great to have RAW in these budget cameras back then, it wasn't the easiest to process. Of course, it's lossless, so the quality you can capture is great. However, you can really rinse through cards quickly because of this. Even with all of the benefits that B-RAW has over Cinema DNG, some people still do prefer working with Cinema DNG. Drop frames are something you need to make sure your card doesn't suffer from though. Luckily, Blackmagic has a recommended media list which details exactly what you need to make sure you don't run into any issues. This unit we have of us here was actually found in some of our old engineering stock. The very distinct design caught our eye while shooting in there one day, and one battery later, to our surprise, it actually works. Apart from the weird issue of the rear LCD, which is probably why it's in our engineering department to begin with. It looks like it received some damage, but we can see our composition and focus well enough to shoot with it. The rear LCD wasn't great on these, to be honest, so even if you grab one that works, I would suggest grabbing a monitor if you can deal with the extra bulk. But if you really want to keep it pocket sized, you can get by just using the rear LCD. If you do use a monitor, it's worth being very careful as the camera uses a micro HDMI port, which is a truly awful connector, which will break after too much use or a strong bump. For this reason, I would seriously recommend grabbing a cage that has some form of cable protector option, as that will really help with the weak ports here. The build quality of the camera overall is actually incredibly solid. It feels really dense, not as hollow or plasticky as the newer pocket cameras. Unlike its successors, it is truly a pocket camera. It's absolutely tiny at just 128mm wide, 38mm thick and 66mm tall. And it only weighs 360 grams. This was and still is incredibly small and lightweight for a camera like this. Though this camera can easily swell up as soon as you start rigging on accessories that you may need to help with some of the drawbacks of this camera. The internal preamps aren't great, so to achieve good audio, most people would either record externally or at least grab a preamp that can be fed into the camera at its lowest gain setting. Like the Pocket 4K, the original Pocket features a MFT mount, which when paired with the sensor size, means that you can easily adapt a massive range of unique and compact lenses. This means you have a huge range of options to go with depending on what look you want from your system. There's loads of vintage lens options, especially ones that were designed for Super 16. There are some serious gems here that aren't too expensive to grab as well. There are budget cine primes from the likes of Mica, and then modern photographic lenses designed for Micro Four Thirds. It may also be worth grabbing a lens with some kind of optical image stabilization, due to the camera not having any built-in stabilization, a smaller sensor, and a very light body. As well as adapting regularly, you can also use larger format lenses on the camera, either using a regular adapter or speed booster if you want to take advantage of all that extra light. Metabones actually have a specific speed booster that is designed to only work with the original Pocket. This speed booster increases the maximum aperture by a stop and 2/3, and makes your chosen lens 0.58 times wider, so this will turn an 85mm f1.2 into roughly a 50mm 0.75. This is a great option if you want to use larger image circle lenses to achieve imagery that is closer to larger sensor cameras. The battery that the Pocket uses is absolutely tiny. It's an old Nikon battery called the EN-EL20. They are only around 800 mAh or 5.92 Wh, which will last roughly about 30 minutes, but sometimes even less. So you will either need to run around with a large amount of these batteries, swapping often, which is annoying, or run an external battery. One way around this is to use some kind of external power solution. The Pocket uses a very small 2.5 by 0.7mm DC barrel connector, and there are plenty of DT or DTAP cables for connecting the camera to an external power source. This can be done pretty affordably when paired with an MPF plate, which you can easily mount onto the camera when using a cage with it. You can get MPF batteries that are much larger than the internal battery easily and affordably now. If you wanted to use this camera in any kind of professional shoot, I would say using something like this is a must. Though running around with the camera casually, you could definitely just get away with running these tiny internal batteries. The operating system of the original Pocket is pretty simple, honestly. It's not quite as nice to use as the newer Pocket camera systems, but it's relatively straightforward. You have camera, audio, recorder, and display setting tabs. In camera, you can adjust key camera settings like setting your ISO, white balance, and shutter angle. The recorder tab allows you to choose what format you want to shoot, dynamic range, which is essentially your gamma, and then your base frame rate. There's also a time-lapse feature here as well, and with a good power source, this little camera can capture some pretty good time-lapses. Lastly, you have display settings, which allows you to toggle zebras, which will be helpful when exposing along with the histogram. Even so long after its release, the Pocket has a certain charm about it. It truly is a pocket-sized cinema camera, and while it does have its flaws, it is fun to shoot with, and can produce some great imagery. Let us know what you think of the original Pocket in the comments below. And if you liked the video, please give it a like and maybe consider subscribing so you don't miss out on our awesome upcoming content. And thank you so much for watching.